there's one thing that you was an unassailable advantage that's just gone now. But there's another thing that was never possible that's possible. And your job is to figure that out before your competitors do.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Agents of Scale, to show where we talk to people who are actually building the future of work with AI. And today's guest, we've got Jason Cottrell. He's the CEO of Orium and newly elected president of the MACH Alliance. Now, Jason has spent over a decade now helping some of the biggest brands modernize their digital foundations. Orium specializes in helping folks launch composable e-commerce platforms. And Jason can correct me on the specifics of that when we get on here. Jason, welcome to the show.
You know what, Wade? Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Before we dig in, I heard from somebody, I think it was you, we're joking that you are a walking consumer electronics show. I'm curious, what's your favorite gadget you've got right now?
Sure. You know what? I'll maybe go in order. I will say I've mellowed maybe in the last 5 to 10 years. I would say my favorite is actually pretty pedestrian. Like my Aura ring, I've had it for years. The idea of living like it is a device. If I lost it, I would immediately go out and replace it. And it's just so easy to fit into your day-to-day life. I'll maybe if I went, I've kind of maybe looking at what's on my desk here. If I were to go maybe one step further, the one that I find I really like, but weird some people out is the Meta Ray-Bans.
Mm.
And I think they're really great. They're practical. If I'm out with my kids, I can take quick photos, I can ask quick questions. Like I find for me, it's actually again, pretty easy to incorporate in my day-to-day life. And I think that's a great sign in terms of how things have advanced in the last 5 to 10 years. But I find that one, some people, when they know it's a connected device, still give you a second look. But the one that gets me, so I'll wear this device. It's an IO, and I think the company's actually, I'm not sure they even make them anymore. But it's basically a blue light band. So when I'm traveling for work, when I'm changing time zones, and I've got a flight to Europe later this week, I'll actually wear it to help me adjust my sleep schedule. And I'll wear it on the plane, and I got this blue light on, and I probably look like an absolute idiot, but it works, so I do it. Yeah.
That's incredible. What do you make of the AI pendants that are making the rounds? I don't know if anyone's gotten crazy popular yet, but you're starting to see more of these.
You know what? I think it's going to be one of those things that's strange until it's not.
Yep.
I think, you look at the original Google Glass and some of the initial instantiations of, say, the concept of smart glasses, and then all of a sudden, it's taken, 10, probably almost 15 years, but the finally you get devices that are a couple $100 and actually do some targeted things reasonably well. And I think it'll happen faster than that. But I think it's going to be one of those things that's strange until it's not.
Yeah, it's slowly at first, then everything all at once.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about Orium. How'd you come up with the idea? What were you doing before? What's the problem you were trying to solve? Give us the origin story.
Yeah, so I mean, we're a consultancy and system integrator. We're generally working with the largest brands in the world, companies doing hundreds of millions to billions in online transaction volume. So, what we've carved out a role doing, most of these companies have pretty complex systems on how they handle their customer interactions, purchasing, fulfillment, and do that on a global basis. So we've carved out kind of a strong niche with many of the fastest growing providers in commerce experience and actually increasingly kind of agentic capabilities to really deploy that infrastructure. So thinking of us as an advisor, but also a almost towards a general contractor, starting to steadily bring out the old stuff, bring in the new stuff, but you have to do it without ever kind of missing a beat because that's a very expensive mistake.
Yeah, and one of the things you all specialize in is helping these large companies, large e-commerce platforms set up these composable infrastructures. Talk a little bit about what that means and why you all sort of believe that is the ideal way for these companies to build their systems.
Yeah, and I would say, it's more than in the enterprise and at scale, it's more than the ideal way. It is the absolute reality. None of these companies run their entire business on one system. And there was a point maybe 15 years ago where either it was all custom built or it was all, they could buy everything on one system. And that ran most of the commercial kind of operations for commerce as it manifested. But now that things have scaled, gotten more complex, now that commerce is not just online, it's also store, it's also wholesale and fulfillment and B2B, it's also all these other channels and all these other things. The reality is, most of these companies are running 20 to 40 different systems. And so we try to look for smart ways to first kind of consolidate that a bit. But the reality is, that's what they need to run their business. And so the concept behind composable really was this push in the last 5 years as part of, obviously why we believe in the concept of the MACH Alliance as well. There are conceptual and technical ways to do this well. And there are vendors that have embraced, being able to be plugged in and plugged out and working well with other vendors. And I think most who've been in the enterprise space long enough know that's not always the case. Some try to put walls up. Some are only thinking in their specific domain. So I think we tend to represent partners that plug in well, play well with others, and technically have the foundation in place to support that well. It also tends to mean that they've been kind of many of the most pioneering partners in the push to AI and agentic, and kind of really carving out their role there. They're able to move fast because they can build for very specific domains of expertise.
Can you give an example of something you've done for one of your clients?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that actually we won an award just last year for one of our customers, and it's a brand called Harry Rosen, and I think it's a really great example because a lot of people think of these use cases as just must be these big, massive enterprises, and they're a great example where they do a few hundred million a year, but they were really looking to pioneer. It's a gentleman who is taking over as kind of third generation in the business. He came in and was on kind of this big all integrated suite, but every time he wanted to touch something, it was months, and really kind of was finding he's trailing the market. He was worried. He's saying like, I need to make sure that there's a fourth generation, that we're thriving, and that we're serving our customers and reinventing ourselves for what's about to come. And so we were actually able to work over the course of actually primarily 9 months, kind of start to finish, to replace the core of what they were doing. And since we've done that, they've almost 5x'd their kind of digital commerce volume and brought it into store, totally overhauled their loyalty, totally changed how the channels in which they interact with customers, serve and sell. All those things, they were able to do in a pretty rapid period of time. And I think part of that is like they were pushing boundaries, and then they also, they made a choice to really kind of approach kind of pulling together the systems that were best for them for their specific use case.
So you mentioned increasingly this is happening with agentic capabilities.
Yeah.
What is actually working here? Why is this why is what you do, this composable approach, such a good way for companies to adopt agentic capabilities?
I see two parts to it. So one, there's been all sorts of noise the last few weeks, right? Obviously, there's the MIT study, which is how many organizations are struggling to derive kind of the target ROI from their use cases. There was a great piece from Google that was looking at obviously actually a much higher number that are succeeding. But in both cases, what are the themes on what is and is not working? And one of the key things that's come out is when it's, coming in and dropping millions, tens of millions, solving these broad use cases, those tend to fail. When
Mm-hmm.
you're coming in and working with specialized vendors in specific domains, that's where it tends to succeed. And we've seen the same, like when we're building agents for customers, they're not these one massive agent that do all. And you've probably seen this in your own experience, but like it's specific points of expertise, specific functions fine-tuned, and often kind of combined together in different common. That's the concept of composing. So whether you're doing that kind of within the architecture of an agent, or you're doing it across agents, across systems, it tends not to be just like one, you sign one thing and you're done. It's being built up in specialty domains, often with different partners. And I think what's really exciting there, like I like to say it's not going to be one agent that runs your business. It's going to be many, many agents that run many, many parts of your business. It's almost more like how you think of hiring, training, managing, running, and employing people. I think the second component of so the second component of composability that I think is powerful in this domain is this is a Game of Thrones out here, right? And one week one group's in front, and the next another group's in front, and the reality is it's going to be the next few years that shake out in terms of not even just who wins and loses, but who's good at what, who's most cost effective at what. And so I think what's powerful there is if you spend you know all your time, energy, effort locking in on one path, there's a very high odds that you will get outpaced on a 1 to 2 year basis. But people who think of compose, they're building systems. Like if we've got a like we run Zapier in our business, right? If we've got a Zap that we want to change, kind of one input, one system, one output, um, that's fine. That's pretty straightforward for us to do. We have that adaptability, and I think the same is true. Like when you're thinking about the agentic infrastructure in your business, how you're approaching the problem, thinking about composability, knowing that you're going to want to fine tune it, curate it, iterate it. A good example in our case would be, we've pushed down a path on some fronts that touch into our finance back office, and obviously, some of those systems. Aren't necessarily the best for plugging into the rest of the business and or kind of automation. Now, as we upgrade that, we've been able to build to a point now as we upgrade that, the ability to incorporate a more modern system now is going to come much faster. But we've built for kind of that iteration in mind. I think the last part that's really exciting about composability is the most powerful thing that we found is it's not about just taking an old process and snapping it into an automation. It is about fundamentally rethinking the process, and that often is rethinking just what context and information do we have? What's the start? What's the context and information we have? And what's the outcome we want? And when we kind of back up and approach that, and when you think regardless of systems, and when you think regardless of departments, and really think what's the goal we're going for? And I think it allows us to rethink how systems, people, and processes are going to come together, and how we kind of compose them in the right mix, who we use for what. And again, I think that businesses that have the ability to do that will unlock some of the highest value out of what agentic capability is going to offer.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a couple really important points here. One is most of these companies simply can't. They're using so many tools. It's not practical to say, okay, we're just going to do this massive lift and shift to like one net new thing. But what is more practical is to say, hey, we're going to take this component and we're going to modernize this, and we're going to swap out this piece for that other piece in more narrower capabilities. And then, over time, you've got a, kind of ship of Theseus sort of thing where it's like,
Yeah.
it's still a boat, but it's all new pieces than before.
I think that's I think it's 100% correct. And also too, like, I think I remember one of the major tech CEOs suggesting essentially there's going to be AI and data and everything in between is going to be gone. And I don't think that's the case. I think, we're finding there's a lot of things you want done in a deterministic system, in a deterministic way. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that you want with kind of heavy controls placed around it and constraints. There's a lot of things where just plain old automation is perfect. It's cheap, it's predictable. In many cases we want we want certain systems of record to be predictable and deterministic and to be able to interface with automation. But I want it done the same way every time. And so I think it's the combination and the ability to move in slices. I think that's very powerful. That is going to be the reality for the next 5 to 10 years at least.
Totally. And the second point you made on, Game of Thrones esque world is, we're in this transformative shift. Everybody is predicting where they think it's going to go. But I think practically speaking, we don't know where it's going to go. And so in a time like this, it is especially beneficial to have the optionality to say, I'm going to swap out this, try this new thing. Oh, here's another new thing. I want the ability to try that out versus sort of feeling like you've got to make these 3-5 year commitments to a particular way of doing something and then just realize a month later, like, shoot, there was something new that I didn't know was coming. And so it's so powerful to take this approach.
You got it. And it's also the place to get the fast start too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you bite off too much, I see it happen over and over where, that same organization is sitting there, they spend the first 3 months then trying to get everybody in on it. The next 3 months arguing over who should be doing what. The following 3 months reassigning that. generally nothing's been done still at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and instead, those who, are starting in targeted domains, thinking about scalability, have a North Star, like they're the ones starting off making process building, kind of real points of expertise, momentum in the organization. Those are the ones I'm going to bet on in terms of who's going to successfully transform to be an agentic enterprise.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the MIT paper, you mentioned the Google study. Um, you're having a chance to work with some of these very large commerce companies. What are you seeing that is actually working from an agentic point of view? Like, what are the best doing that is separating them from the rest?
I think so. I'll take the commerce domain to begin with, and what I will say is um, that's actually been particularly transformative because um, it's not just internal optimization, where sometimes there can be all sorts of reasons why, market pressures may be delayed. You may not go through kind of some of the optimization that you could as a business. But when your customers are fundamentally finding you a different way, have changed their expectation on how they're going to interact with you, they're changing the products, the criteria and the products which they're going to buy based on kind of now kind of answer engines and kind of more personalized shopping assist. And very, very close to, it's actually one of the, I think, been one of the most interesting announcements in our space the last few weeks, actually, just being able to buy. And there's more and more around payment and fulfillment protocols now that's been defined that companies can invest against. So I would say actually interesting, like that. How our what we are seeing is customers who are optimizing for these changes and leading there are now starting to see that gain and customers of ours, brands that we're watching who are thinking about assets that will kind of transition from what helps human buyers today, gives them some gain, but also going to help them as agents play more and more of a role in discovery, in choice, and eventually in purchasing. They're starting to win. And I think that gap is going to widen. But they're building the capabilities towards that, investing towards that. And even though there's still some uncertainty, they're taking steps. And that iterative composable approach helps them do so. They're not, making 1 year big bets.
Mm-hmm.
They're moving fast and adapting. And in many cases, it means that they're not just trying to meet, you know, optimize content for think about the buying journey, be able to take purchasing and orders. They're not just doing that. They're thinking about then how is all that going to be reorganized so that it supports internal operations? How can we deliver more to point of sale with clienteling, to their contact center, inline agents that can eventually negotiate on the brand's behalf with customers? They're also starting to rethink. I think that it snowballs quickly to rethinking their internal operations
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I think that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, and of course you're talking about here. ChatGPT announced that they're launching apps, which allows you to show up directly inside the experience. They also announced partnerships with, I think, Stripe and
Yes.
Shopify, so you can check out directly inside of ChatGPT. And so you're seeing just a lot more shopping happen inside of that surface area in the past.
That's exactly. So we were one of the few SI launch partners for the ACP announcement. So the
Mm-hmm.
Stripe, ChatGPT, Shopify kind of combo, and there's
Yeah.
there's a number of our other commerce partners like Commerce Tools, Commerce, and others who are kind of adopted in that standard too. And I think what it is it has the critical mass that um, you know may this be the defined standard 5 years from now? No, but it's going to be a primary one. There's probably no way to not have some support for it in terms of how you'll be discovered as a brand that does commerce and how you'll be able to take transactions for at least certain types of purchases. So it's got enough critical mass there that people can now invest, brands can now invest against it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most consumers have no idea this is coming. But the fact that it's announced that you can do it with Etsy now, that like companies are clamoring now to get this capability added and get approved for it. I think that's amazing. I'm really excited to see what that does, even to a degree during this holiday season, but especially next year.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch my own personal shopping patterns change with these tools. Like I'm finding that I buy more stuff. And it's I buy odder things too, because it's like these niche problems that I have where in the past I'd just be like, like it's not that big of a deal. The amount of
Mhm.
research I'm gonna have to do to actually go figure out how to solve this thing is just like not practically worth it. And so I just kind of like live with this annoyance in my
Mhm.
life. Whereas with ChatGPT, you can literally just be like, "Hey, I have this annoyance. What should I do about it?" And it like gives you a whole plan. And some of them it's just like, "Hey, make these lifestyle changes or these behavioral changes or whatever." But some of the times it's like, "Here's a thing you can buy for it." And I'm just like, "Oh, if I can just buy that thing and it costs me $20 or whatever," I'd be like, "Great." Solve my problem. And so there's this category of like minor nuisances that just would have been ignored in the past that now I'm finding, hey, I'm not ignoring them because I have a tool that can help me do it. And I have to
I,
imagine that's going to show up in a bunch of like commerce players, conversion rates, sales, etc.
I think that's correct. Because also, now often you're not just going in to find and buy a thing, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
certainly a category of how people are using these tools. But I'll give a good example would be I had to I decided I'd be smart and I'd take on kind of repainting or kind of refreshing a porch at one of our rental properties, a concrete porch. And I'd never done that before. But actually working through ChatGPT with video, let me show it to you. How would I approach this? What are different ways I could solve this? What are the pros and cons? And then working through to, okay, here's my approach. What product should I buy? What can I get near me? Like being able to walk through all of that, all the way through to, I think at the end of it, I was literally on video, like, am I applying this? How am I applying this? And it was almost like a back and forth discussion, being able to see it, have a convo. It was almost like I don't know, like a tradesman is there with me, or my dad is sitting over my shoulder offering advice, kind of thing. So I think it fits into these journeys. It fits into these overall optimizations you're trying to do in your life, and then the product you're selecting is just a part of that. And I think companies that understand that, rebuild content for that, think about how they fit in that journey. I think there's a lot of opportunities for, actually pretty specific niche products to do very well with that, because ChatGPT can kind of help unlock that power, and Gemini and others can unlock that path.
Yeah, it's like it's bringing, like in the case of that porch, like you're buying things that in the past the tradesman would have bought, but now it's like opening up a new market for that product to somebody who's like, well, why can't I do this? Like,
I can do this. Yeah.
yeah, this is which may be famous last words, but a lot of these things aren't that complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It can give you the confidence to do it. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. So hey, you just got elected as the president of the MACH Alliance.
Hmm.
For those listening, what is that, and what role does this consortium play?
Yeah, so the MACH Alliance, I think, is a really incredible organization. So it's over 122 different software vendors, most of the global systems integrators, so the Accentures and Deloittes of the world, two of the major hyperscalers, AWS, GCP, and then a number of the major kind of payment providers and other infrastructure providers for kind of modern cloud in content, customer data, and digital experience. So I think I mentioned that cohort before of companies who really play well in specific domains and play well together, play well with your existing systems, and have been built around that ethos and with the appropriate technical underpinnings. Um, and so, the Alliance has done a lot of work the last few years, really pushing legacy vendors, um, both to kind of up their game, and to do it years faster and to a higher standard, but also developing a mark of trust that the tens of thousands of enterprise customers served by this cohort kind of know that the vendors in this cohort will kind of interoperate and work pretty well together. And really, where the alliance is going, and why I've taken on the president position, what was interesting to me, is we're pushing to be one of the first true kind of agentic ecosystems. So partnering with many of the standards bodies and trying to kind of bring that into practice amongst our members. Our members already are building kind of over 100 different kind of point agentic capabilities, often tied into their products. what we're pushing is how do we make sure that we start to open up more agent to agent use cases, agent to system use cases to do it sooner and to do it in a way, once again, that kind of within 12 months or so, we've got kind of these real productized available use cases for companies to deploy for their customers. And I think it's a really interesting challenge. Like there's lots of agent building going on out there. Um, I think you would probably see some of it too. A lot of it is just like it's a point agent. It's not designed to do anything else on its own, or it's separate systems. And then maybe, say Zapier, you're interacting with the systems, where the agents live off somewhere else. We're really trying to push to look at the innovation that's going on in terms of building agentic capability, what jobs that solves, all the innovation our members are already doing, but pushing to start to link that together in our domain of expertise, our ecosystem, sooner rather than later. And that's what we're pushing on.
So as someone, I definitely love this approach. As someone who's benefited a ton from things like REST APIs and OAuth to be able to integrate 8,000 different tools together, like interoperability does create such a valuable set of things for customers because now they're able to get everything that they bought to work well together. In this agentic world, where do you see we have interoperability issues? Like, what are the places where we're going to need standards? We're going to need some of these capabilities to emerge.
It's interesting because I think we're watching very quickly as some of these standards emerge as they evolve. What I would say is, so we're watching obviously like elements like MCP A2A start to define kind of how some of these points of interface might work. Um, Standards like ACP, AP2 starting to come out that start to define, say, how payments, transactions, trust might work. What's really interesting to us and is the unsolved domain right now is actually more how will composability of agents, like how will the kind of ecosystems of agents come together? The organization that we've looked to and partnered very closely with that I think is solving a lot of that is a group called Agency, AGNTCY, and it's a consortium of over 100 firms, or Orium also as a supporter of that, and they're really looking more at like how will discovery work. How can identity and trust work? How can agent-to-agent communication work? And how will observability and governance work? And I think we're finding there's elements of that many enterprises can pull out and make sense of what works for them. And for us as an ecosystem, the same is what are the parts of this that can make sense as we look to kind of I would say right now in the next 6 months, my and to 12 months, my priority is just challenging our members to build together sooner
Mm-hmm.
and think of use cases across each other sooner. But to start to then bring kind of see what's working, what are the approaches that kind of can become a more defined approach for our ecosystem in this commerce, customer data, and experience space, and start to bring those to the table. But I think what agency solving is one of the more interesting ones for me that's getting less coverage, but really will be what's required to get proper agent ecosystems working.
Yeah. MCP is one that we've built a lot on, Model
Mhm.
Context Protocol. You mentioned A2A and these other sort of protocols that help agents talk to agents. Where are you seeing, like, what are the use cases you're finding adoption of this to be quite effective?
I think I would say some of it is obviously kind of like honestly, some of it's just from a tool chain perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We're finding, I would say, those who are rethinking actually their day-to-day work are tending to be the fastest adopters right now. Like we've got staff who, they've used Zapier to put together. I think you do like the custom MCP where they can stitch together like an optimized and controlled kind of endpoint they can work against, and then they're running that against their code generator, or they're running it against kind of a CRM or sales agent that our teams built. Like some of those use cases, I think just people can move fast, especially within constraints. They say the guardrails a product like yours can put around it today. I see those team members, those teams really pulling apart. From a broader kind of company perspective, what I would say is um, many are working with MCP. I worry that in many cases they're just essentially plugging up against it, but the system underneath doesn't have the appropriate guardrails, observability. controls like access control and permission constraints, honestly, to make it work properly. And so that for us is a big focus is either we've got to start putting some of the kind of agent frameworks and we've got to start wrapping more around it, or that's where I think like products like yours really come to the table where they can offer a layer of control and governance that can allow you to move faster without having to overhaul absolutely everything you're doing. Um, but I would say right now, I think that's actually if anything stalled. Like there's a lot of promise around MCP, but many using, I worry about how many are using it. There's not enough, like the systems underneath it weren't built for it. And they're lacking key components of being able to work with this kind of safely and scalably.
Yeah, we're definitely finding that our customers are benefiting a lot from our MCP server being able to inherit our access controls. And so you
Yes.
can, do granular approvals at a like per scope level, basically at the end of the day,
Yep. Yeah.
is pretty powerful. What, you mentioned before, like, hey, there's a lot of use cases where I love a plain old deterministic workflow. How are you thinking about educating your clients on like when to use some of these pieces? Like when do you use an API? When do you use an MCP server? When are you using an agent? When are you
Yeah.
just using a workflow? Like how do you explain that concept to others?
Yeah, I think I mean what's interesting about it is look, it starts with let's keep it as simple as possible. So let's start with just straightforward automations as much as possible and go as far as we can with that. Um, I think there's the second component though of just like, when you start to hit the limits of that, then rethinking, well, where is a person picking up on this? What are they actually doing? How are they thinking about the problem? I think that's where you can find interesting examples on where um, LLMs can be inserted to kind of how and where they would find their place. Like if I look at like we're for contract generation in our case, I don't generally want an LLM do. I like we like a straightforward mail merge or similar, or document merge or document population on parts of a template is all we don't want to be checking everything. We don't want to be rewriting it. Um, uh, but you know what? For parsing all the calls we do with a prospective customer, using that to define specifically what needs to be done, validating that with or alongside a person. You know what? We can now do that better and generally, faster and generally better than if we were having a human do that alone. So an LLM's great at that, and then we can verify that bit, and then yeah, plug that in the contract, which I don't want to change. I want that exactly how it is. So I think we can start to break out parts of the workflow, but I think the key is push as far as you can with deterministic or kind of more straightforward automation methods, and then think about where you plug in um, kind of some of the non-deterministic methods. I think the key that's changed though is you can take it so much further. So the reward to go down the path on many more processes is higher. So you find the mix. It might be 80% in one camp, 20% in another, but the end reward to get to kind of to actually be able to rethink that process is powerful. I laugh because for us internally. We're really at a point for many processes now that like it's frustrating for us if it's not automated. And you probably, or maybe I take this for granted, you're probably ahead of us just given the ethos of your firm too. But now it's like, why is this not automated? It went from why should we automate this to why is this not like this is not automated?
Mm-hmm.
We've had this concept of the three times rule in our firm. And
Mm.
I think it's one of the things that I've observed with those doing kind of like AI native startups from the ground up. And we've really pushed to bring as an ethos to ourselves and to our customers. If you're doing something more than three times, our default mode should be progressive automation until it is automated. Doesn't mean you have to have it perfectly automated the fourth time, but like
Yeah.
each time now you need to be slicing out more chunks until it is automated. And that I think is a powerful thing to bring in culturally as a firm. Um, as an aside, while I'm on that one, like the other key thing I think is it's the firms who start to rethink like those self-optimize, like where do you need those self-optimizing loops that you can go from something that takes months or just never happens
Yeah.
through to just you build that at the core of the process. And when you find those, that's a huge unlock. And I think one of the big differences I've seen for like AI native firms versus those who are not.
You said two things that resonated quite a bit with me there. The idea that if you it's like every like if you do something 3 times, you got to go automate it. Like that to me is such a powerful behavioral unlock. I talk to a lot of folks that want to do automation, but they don't necessarily know how to recognize when they should do it. And it's been interesting to watch this agentic wave come upon us because it's opened up everybody's creativity again. It felt like it's given them permission to be like, oh, why shouldn't I automate this? And I'm finding that in talking to a lot of these folks, 9 times out of 10, they didn't actually need AI. Like this was perfectly
Yeah.
solvable with, plain old fashioned deterministic automation workflow software for the last 10 plus years. But just the fact that we have this like magic AI thing out there, now people are starting to think about it as possible again and starting to recognize those things. So I do think teaching people how to recognize that stuff is pretty powerful. The second thing that we've noticed is, hey, you talked about how that like recognize it 3 times is a powerful cultural tenet as well too. We've noticed this too, where for the longest time we've had this value: don't be a robot, build the robot. And
Mm.
right now you see a lot of employee bases, being fearful of like what might AI do to my job. And I think that is a fairly human reaction, an understandable one. But if your culture is one in which it says, I'm curious about what is possible with these tools, you're constantly going to be able to evolve and adapt to the times, and your skill sets will be much more future proof if you're leaning
Yeah.
in versus if you're scared of where these things are going. So I think you hit, just two critical bits there.
There's an interesting kind of, it's actually a framework that I think we took from a post that Zapier had done a few months ago, and we've been using it for most of this year with our own team. And so one of the things I found really interesting there is people don't jump to magically just rethinking their whole profession. And most start with some degree of hesitancy. It's natural. And I think it was kind of activated, adaptive, transformative. I think we're kind of the general premise. And we kind of subset and define that a bit more for our use case. But what's interesting is no one jumps to the fourth spot. Everybody moves in those stages, like almost maybe they take a week. Maybe they take a year, but everybody moves through that. So we've kind of taken the challenges, recognize, and then just try to move it, accept, get you through each next one. Don't jump to the end. Get you through the next tier as fast as possible. And so I think one of the things that as we get to the later stages or so at the early stages, what we found is so powerful is peer-to-peer sharing. Because honestly, me standing up as a CEO and saying, this is going to be wonderful, this is great, I think people kind of giving the side eye. And sure, versus when it's peers in their professions, like this is how it's working for me. This, I can't like, I never have to do this again. And like this gave me this unlocked this whole new capability for me. When people are coming to the table with that, I think combined with how we're using some of these tools in our day-to-day use, just
Hmm.
personally, those two things seem to get people started in my experience. I think our role as leaders, as we get to the later quadrants, is really helping people rethink like their how functions are going to evolve in this new era. Because I think one of the most powerful things is, yes, some parts will get faster, some parts will get more automated. I mean, look, we've had DevOps for quite a while now. We write more software than ever, have more engineers than ever, and some of that pattern's accelerating. But overall, I think like it means we're going to write more software first, but it also rethinks what's possible. People can play across different domains that were not possible tomorrow. Or sorry, previously. But I look at say our QAs, and people are saying, well, we're not going to need any QAs anymore. So, hey, yes, we're writing more software and actually, the infrastructure to support all of that means actually you need automated QA, if anything, more than you needed before. So there's a step one. There's kind of some role drops off, but there's something needed. But we're finding an actual agent building, like the evals skill set, is a very viable transition for some types of QA, especially those who maybe pushed more, like have a bit more dev background or self-taught and or have been down, like have that testing mindset. And also, it's not 10% of a team anymore. It's 30 or 40%. And so I think there's all nearly every function. I think there's an interesting rethink that you're about to go through if you look at like truly what are you motivated by, what's the mindset and value system, and what values do you bring to the table, and I think for most there is an opportunity. So the more that we as leaders can paint what that is for our team, I think then people really in those last few steps then can start to engage in that and feel the permission to start to push, like bringing those new capabilities kind of to their teams, to the company.
You know, I think the sort of comment you made on learning these capabilities in stages resonates so much. And I see this is where a lot of folks fail, is that they try and jump to the finish line. They're like, I want this like magical experiments where I've, automated all of customer support, or like engineers are never writing another line of code again, etc. Which sounds, incredible to sort of be able to do that sort of stuff. But the reality is, it's sort of like trying to go to calculus and you don't know what fractions are, or you don't know what multiplication is. And so a lot of this is more progressive, where it's okay, like, how do I get a taste? How do I get my toes wet? Okay, I know how to do that piece. Okay, great. Now how do I start to compose these things together and chain these things together? And all of a sudden, that's how you build up to some of these more sophisticated systems. And it takes time. And I do think it's important that like leaders are able to step in to guide the company through that transition, not just simply go, we're going to go do AI. And then to your point, people are kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Sure, Wade, sure, Jason. Like, I guess we are at the end of the day. One thing I was curious to talk to you about is, you've talked about one of your favorite quotes is, hey, if your business had one advantage in the last decade, it's now gone. And I'm curious here, how do you think about uncovering new advantages, discovering new ways of competing in the age of AI?
Yeah, and I do love that quote, and it's Ethan Mollick, and I love kind of obviously kind of the perspectives he puts out in this space. Yeah, like if there's one thing that you was an unassailable advantage that's just gone now, but there's another thing that was never possible that's possible, and your job is to figure that out before your competitors do. And I think if I look at our own business, right, like. In consulting advisory, like that concept of billable hour of utilization, like that's just been the thing. And that's what you optimize for. That's what customers are used to buying. And I think, steadily over the coming years, that is and should go away as a concept of procurement and measure. And on one hand, I think that's terrifying for some. On the other hand, like what we're finding is like customers want outcomes, and we can optimize for specific types of expertise, and I can fix price things and say I will get you this defined change from A to B, and put a price around that the customer can count on, despite variability and uncertainty that I never could have accommodated before, and do it comfortably, and the customer gets exactly what they want. I get exact like I we define kind of a higher value place for us to play, and can start to optimize for how well we do it, how fast we do it, not just how many people are parked in a seat doing it. I think that's win-win, but it's a shift. It's a shift for firms like ours. And I think it's just one example of how that's changing, just kind of across the board, for firms. And I admire like obviously you've been pushing as well to really put kind of Zapier at the forefront of what's going on too. And you've been doing it before it was kind of it's clear at the pace you're rolling it out. You've been thinking about this for a while, and really pushing to where you have kind of new advantage as well.
Yeah. Another unique thing is you established Orium as a B corporation, which
Yeah.
means in addition to shareholders, you have other constituencies you care about: employees, customers, society writ large. I'm curious, where do you think AI helps you benefit those other stakeholders and the other constituencies?
I think the reality is this is going to be disruptive. The it just as the internet was disruptive, just as like this, but and this is I think going to be as or more substantial, and it's going to happen faster. And there's no way around that. The what I'm optimistic about is, um, we have ways now to model circular economies, ecological outcomes, to invent and bring to market new drugs, new therapies, to be able to do personalized medicine, to be able to do bespoke manufacturing, things that that I think hold us back as a society right now, that we have new solves for. It's almost like a larger version of what we were talking about earlier, like say more functionally or within our firms. And so I think a key is trying to make choices, at least for us as a firm, along the way in terms of who we partner with, like how are these workloads powered, who are we partnering with, who and where are we partnering with for that? How can we bring as much of our team as possible and optimize kind of where they are at the end of this, and that they're benefiting from being on the forefront of this. Um, and I think that trying to keep in mind too, like there's these broader rethinks that are going to be possible, and trying to at least be some small part of that, where we can see those opportunities over the coming years. Um, but I think it's never been uh, as an entrepreneur, and I love this stuff. I've never been more, if you like. I've never seen so much disruption and so much opportunity all at the same time. But overall, I think that will work out net benefit for the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of a technology that has as much transformative capabilities as one like this. Certainly, I haven't seen it in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Jason, thanks for joining us. This is our latest episode of Agents and Scale, and I hope you all will follow along for our next episodes. Cheerio, everyone.